Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Tulsi Gabbard did God's work here, and she effectively ended Kamala Harris's run for the president in 20 seconds, 30 seconds? This essentially ended Kamala Harris's campaign. If you remember, Kamala Harris was riding high after that first debate. She went after Joe Biden, and she put a knife in Joe Biden. And after putting that knife in Joe Biden, she popped up in the polls. You had like 40, 50% saying, oh man, she seems so presidential. They knew nothing about Kamala Harris. And yet they were talking about she's seeming presidential. In about 30 seconds, Tulsi Gabbard put a knife in Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris in no way could answer those things, and as you could hear, the audience in some respects were clapping and wooing, in other respects groaning, especially at the keeping a man in death row, while knowing that the guy, or at the very least having evidence that the guy was innocent. God's work ended. For all intents and purposes, right now, Kamala Harris is polling in single digits. And even in California, there was one poll, at the very least, that I saw Tulsi Gabbard polling ahead of Kamala Harris, even in her own home state. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that was California, and I believe that was Tulsi Gabbard over Kamala Harris. Tulsi Gabbard has been steadily increasing her support, be it in individual donors or in the polls. And right now, Tulsi Gabbard will be on the debate stage in October. Tulsi Gabbard had the opportunity to sit down with Crystal Ball and talk about the previous debates and talk about the campaign and get on just having a conversation. Some of this I like, some of it I don't like. I consider Tulsi Gabbard a person, not a brand. And as a person, not a brand, she's not necessarily going to, or I am not going to agree with everything that she says. However, when it comes to foreign policy, she's my sword. On issues of Iran, on Russia, on China, even on this notion of identity politics, she, for the most part, toes a line that I agree with. I don't agree with everything she says, and there's a few policy positions that are troubling to me. However, in this very specific point on issues of foreign policy, she is my sword, probably more so than anybody else in the race. She gets an opportunity to talk to Crystal Ball, who left MSNBC. As you remember, Crystal Ball said MSNBC exerted editorial control over her show, and there were certain things that I would imagine she had to self-censor, but at the very least, she had to get herself checked out before she could do a show. Well, she's now on the Hill, and she has her own show with another gentleman, and she has the opportunity to sit down and talk to Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard gets to chuckle about essentially taking Kamala Harris out the race and is asked the question on whether or not Elizabeth Warren is fit to be commander-in-chief. I think you'll like this. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the PayPal patron. I saw a video today that I didn't particularly like of Tulsi Gabbard. Medicare for All is my litmus test, and it seems like she has waffled significantly on that particular plan. That would be a separate video in and of itself, but for right now, let's succinctly watch as she laughs at killing, or politically that is, destroying Kamala Harris. And when she's asked this question about whether or not Warren is fit to be commander-in-chief. Now, I have to be honest, this perspective, I don't know what gives Tulsi Gabbard any more credibility to be commander-in-chief. I suppose she's using this argument as, I was a soldier, so I know. I hate to break the story, Hitler was a soldier. And there were all sorts of lessons that he took from being a soldier that were not applicable to the job. Nevertheless, I tend to like what she says on issues of foreign policy, so I'm not going to ding her on that. I'm just kind of making the point that that argument is a little bit shaky, but it was sufficient enough to take down Kamala Harris. She will be on the debates next week. Keep your eyes glued. Let's watch her here talk to Crystal Ball, talking about Elizabeth Warren and giggling, laughing at destroying Kamala Harris.
So you've been critical of Senator Harris in the past and even went so far as to question whether she was prepared to be commander-in-chief. We now see Senator Warren really rising in the polls. She's first in a lot of national polls and several state polls as well, early state polls. Do you believe that she's prepared to be commander-in-chief?
I haven't seen much come from her in the way of what kind of leadership and decision-making that she would bring to that most important responsibility that the president has as commander-in-chief, and just as a soldier and an American, that's very concerning for me. So, you know, for voters, I think that's an important thing to look out for from everyone who's running for president, is what kind of experience do you have in this area? What kind of depth and understanding do you bring to these very nuanced and complex issues with how the United States is relating with other countries, what kind of leadership we're providing in the world, and having the kind of foresight and judgment that we've seen leaders from across both party lines have lacked for far too long, that have brought us to this position where, you know, for all three of us, we've seen our country at war for the vast majority of the years that we've been alive.
One thing we debated this morning was, and when we heard that,
you know, she has a really good point. Not just a really good point. If you want to know what the person does or will do in the office, I suggest that you don't necessarily look at what they say. You look at what they voted for in the past, what they've said in the past. Trying to get elected and just saying whatever you need to say to get elected is one thing. What you've represented in the past, I would give a little bit more credence to. And Warren has been ideologically on the side of Israel from the standpoint of their current politics. She's been somewhat hawkish on foreign policy. She voted for these defense budgets. I would imagine that her foreign policy would run in kind. Let's keep going. She's going to talk about Harris.
the news that you were going to be up on the stage is who are you going to kneecap next? Last time it was Kamala
I
Harris.
saw that too.
We had a big debate. We were like, who is she going to take out? You effectively ended Kamala Harris's candidacy. She's down at 3% in the latest, I think, Emerson poll.
Ouch.
Who's the next target for you?
Now, I don't like this question. Who's the next target? That question is funny, but I don't particularly like the question. I don't think she went up there with this notion of putting a target on. Oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. She did put a target on Kamala Harris's back, but they're running in a presidential campaign. You have no idea how much I wish, God, I hope she gets on the campaign stage and brings up stuff about Warren. I don't think she would ever attack Sanders. Warren, however, I do think is fair game. And maybe, Tulsi's standpoint is I need to get to the top, and if I need to associate myself with a person who's higher up than me, that's only a positive. And I got to be honest, if Elizabeth Warren is not living up to what Tulsi thinks she should live up to as a frontrunner, she should hit her. She's in a campaign. Her goal is to win in that campaign, and Elizabeth Warren is standing in her way. Any vote that she can take out of Elizabeth Warren that can go to her as a positive. I have to be honest, in my wildest dreams, I've hoped that her and Sanders were working together in almost a certain degree of tandem where she's his Batman or she's his Dark Horse. I don't necessarily believe that, even though I have my hopes and my wishes. And I don't even know if she's even going to get into that race with the notion of hitting Warren on issues of certain hypocrisy, especially on this notion of foreign policy. I honestly do hope issues of foreign policy come up. Again, you're talking about Saudi Arabia, Iran, China, Venezuela, Russia, impeachment, Russiagate, identity politics. I agree with Tulsi on all of these things. Most of these things are foreign policy. One of these things are not. And on those items of foreign policy, like I said before, she is my sword. Let's let her get her laugh in on taking down Kamala Harris. Not only was it the greatest thing ever, it was awesome to watch.
I'm actually running for president.
Yeah, we had a big debate. We were like, who is she going to take out? You effectively ended Kamala Harris's candidacy. She's down at 3% in the latest, I think, Emerson poll. Who's the next target for you?
I'm actually running for president.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody that.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's. I mean, look, it's a great platform to be on the debate, to be able to speak to millions of people across the country, and so that is what I'm looking forward to doing is to be able to make my case to them, offer why I'm offering to serve them, the experience that I would bring to this role as Commander-in-Chief, and why it is such a central issue to everything else that we're facing.
Well, one of the things that has been tremendously disappointing.
See, I agree with her on that. I mean, there's an honest argument to be made that how on earth are we going to talk about anything domestic if the military budget is nearly $1 trillion? If we're spending that much blood and treasure, how are we going to attend to the issues like Medicare for all and expanding Social Security and those type of things? Even if you raise taxes, it looks like the military budget has to be fit to cut in order to pull some of that wealth back into the country itself. Not to mention, beyond fit to cut, whether you realize it or not, the military is a jobs program. And we can have that jobs program building up the country as opposed to destroying other countries. We should be dropping food as opposed to bombs. It will get us further along the way. Like I said, I don't agree necessarily with everything Tulsi Gabbard said in this particular interview, but I don't need to. There are other items that I greatly disagree with her, and was somewhat greatly disheartened when I found out she kind of dodged or dumped the Medicare for all stuff. But nevertheless, on issues of foreign policy, she is indeed my sword, and I will continue to look at her as such on the specific issue of foreign policy. My rule is straightforward, though. I can't support a candidate that's not supporting Medicare for all, and it seems like Tulsi Gabbard has abandoned Medicare for all. Joseph Balin, Tulsi flipped on Medicare for all. Yes, she now wants choice. Yes, that's true. Extreme Chucka. Tulsi got Kamala dancing for votes right now. Laugh my ass off. Yes, dancing for votes is an understatement. Kamala Harris is polling. He's at like 3%. 3% in some states. Dan Reinhardt. Being a soldier matters for Commander-in-Chief so that you have experience to know when the military advisors are lying to you. Well, like I said, not all responses are applicable. Some are. So don't misunderstand me. I'm just saying she's making a very specific argument that I was a soldier and as such I will be fit for Commander-in-Chief. I'm just making the very specific point that so was Hitler. And that there were some, let's say, perspectives that Hitler had that were not necessarily applicable to being in charge. That said, yeah, when the commanders are potentially lying to her, when she's thinking of the soldiers themselves, meaning she's not completely detached from the position of the soldiers when we are asking them to go and do these particular things. And fact of the matter is, if you go and ask somebody that gave their life, meaning they gave their life over for the country to use as fit, you shouldn't waste that life. I do think those are applicable from the standpoint of your leadership and guidance in regards to making decisions. I don't know. I think she lays on that argument a bit too hard sometimes. But yeah, you're right. There are some things, but I don't doubt that there are some things that are applicable from the standpoint of your job as a soldier and then applying that to Commander-in-Chief. I'm just trying to say that you can't have a broad stroke. There have been other people who've been soldiers who didn't necessarily make good Commander-in-Chiefs. And maybe that's not a fair thing to say. I'm trying to, but before I say it, I need to have an example. And I don't have an example offhand. So put that in quotes because I can't think of a person. But whether I can think of a person or not, I think you would agree with me that not all experiences are applicable to every situation. And yeah, there may be some things that I totally agree with her on as a soldier applying to Commander-in-Chief. I would imagine she might care about the troops more. I think she might have a little bit more level head in regards to some of the actions that she may ask her people to do. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm dinging her for this very specific point. I'm just saying the argument is not applicable in all circumstances. That's all. I mean, there could be other people who are not soldiers that have the same temperament. I don't know if Bernie Sanders served in the military, but whether he served in the military or not, if you look back over a historical record, he tended to be right on many of the situations that came up. Now, and yeah, I guess I'm just making a point. She's laying pretty heavy on that Commander-in-Chief stuff. And I don't necessarily entirely agree that her being a soldier is the thing that's necessary for her to have some experience as she goes into the door for Commander-in-Chief. I don't buy that at all. That's an argument she's making for her political campaign. But that is not necessarily an argument that is entirely flat fact true. Hope you understand what I mean. I'm not dinging her. I'm just making a point that I'm dinging an argument. And the full-throatedness of that particular argument and just making the point that Hitler was also a soldier and not every decision that he made was applicable to being commander-in-chief. That's all. I think that's a flat fact. I don't know how to disagree with. You might disagree with how much emphasis I'm putting on that, which I'm not putting much emphasis on it at all, in as much as to say it's somewhat just an absolute and flat fact true. Told you Tulsi is trash, and you're giving her too much credit for taking Kamala down. No, I am not. No, I'm not. Willie Brown's mistress was weak with a horrible political record. That doesn't really matter. I mean, you have all sorts of people who have a horrible political record. If you look at what Warren was going for, the military budget, didn't believe in Medicare for all, none of that stuff. Didn't stop her from being a frontrunner. Self-identifying as a Native American in and of itself is problematic. And when you think about the women that got put in jail for helping their daughters, meaning they were paying money in order to get their kids in school, the self-identified Native American is pretty much the same. I mean, ultimately, she was trying to find a leg up in order to get in school with some kind of advantage using the Native American thing. Whether it happened or not is besides the point. She can have, and people can have bad records and still run for office and still get very far along. Eric Lawrence. Thank you, Eric Lawrence. I didn't see this. I'm sorry for not seeing this. Thank you, dude. I told you once, she was attacked. Her campaign was over, but keep supporting this trash candidate. I don't think she's trash. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I agree with her foreign policy positions. I don't, you could take issue with something specific, but you're not really taking issue with something specific. You're just attacking her. Bigger Express. From my understanding, she was for Medicare for all, but she wants choice for those people who are unions and military, because some of their plans are better than what Medicare for all will offer Bernie's plan. Yeah, but both of those things aren't the same. Meaning, like, if private insurance is still existing, then that's not Medicare for all. That's something else. Medicare for all is a very specific plan that was instituted as a bill. You're either for it or you're not. Medicare choice sounds like something else to me. And if you're going to allow people to keep their insurance, when Medicare for all pretty much applies everything that you would need under the sun for a healthcare plan, including dental and vision, then I don't know what Medicare choice is in the context of Medicare for all. It sounds like she's adding a private insurance, or essentially using a public option in regards to the healthcare thing. I need to look further at her plan, but the Medicare choice thing is not Medicare for all. That's something else. Dave Reinhardt. First, Bush had a military experience. Is why he deposed Saddam, because he knew what would happen. Is the point. Oh, I see. It's the point that I'm personally going for. Bush was also head of the CIA. And I would argue that you had a different level of politician back then. I mean, they seem to be more measured. I don't necessarily know if entirely being a soldier. I mean, John McCain was a soldier, and John McCain wanted to bomb anything in existence. I mean, there were some situations where the military itself had to rein John McCain in because there were places that John McCain wanted to bomb that the military wasn't on board for. John McCain was a soldier. John McCain would have made a horrible commander-in-chief because the lessons that he got as a soldier were somewhat dramatically different than the lessons I think Tulsi got. I guess he's making my point, though. Just because you're a soldier doesn't necessarily mean you take good lessons from being a soldier. That's all. And I think, I don't know how you disagree with me on that front. I've given you two people who were soldiers who came away with certain opinions and dispositions that you would dramatically, or most people on this channel would dramatically disagree with. That's all. I don't know why that's a negative. Does Medicare for all hurt labor unions? No. No. Mark as well. No. As an absolute, no. And I don't know why anybody would say they would. Think about it for the moment. There are very few labor unions. The percentage of unions in this country has dropped dramatically over the last 40, 50 years. This notion that just because somebody has good health care in a labor union that I shouldn't care about Medicare for all, or that I should hold up, or Medicare for all should be held up just because people in a labor union had a good insurance plan. I am happy that those people were able to get a good insurance plan. There are a lot of people who were not able to. And fact of the matter is, Medicare for all gets rid of copays, get rid of this notion of vision, all this stuff. Like, all of the bills that you pay each month just to have health care, all of the copays that you go when you go to get it checked, all of the bills that you get from various surgeries or various testing that needs to be done. There is no way that the labor union has a situation comparable to that. Meaning, even if they have really, really good health insurance, I have a hard time believing that the health insurance will compare to Medicare for all. I could be wrong. Somebody could send me something from the standpoint of some kind of health insurance plan that the labor unions have. But understand, a health insurance plan is a little bit different than Medicare for All. Medicare for All gets rid of all of your personal bills, stuff that you pay out pocket. My wife went for a procedure. That procedure, they wanted to apparently verify whether she had a particular illness. However, when she was talking to the doctor made it look like that it was going to deal with the illness that she was having. She wakes up and the doctor comes back and tells her something different than what she talked to him about. They send her a bill, and then they send almost immediately a court thing saying that she needs to appear in court in order to deal with the bill. That goes away. Even if my wife had a union, and even if my wife, both of us have pretty good insurance, didn't stop that from taking place. Didn't stop us being eaten alive from bills, nor did it stop my mom from being eaten alive from bills, despite the fact of having pretty good insurance. I'm sorry, insurance does not compare to Medicare for All. There are differences. One gets rid of all your bills. One is just healthcare or health insurance. I am perfectly okay with eliminating each and every health insurance company in this country and relying on Medicare for All for that function. Does it hurt labor unions? How? You need to explain to me how. Right now, 50,000 GM workers are on strike. What did the healthcare, or what did the company do in order to hurt those workers? It cut their healthcare. It eliminated their healthcare, in which case they had to go through COBRA in order to get it. But they eliminated it so fast that you had kids with cancer who apparently had good health insurance, but the company was able to use that against them. Imagine for the moment, you take your bald head kid to get their chemotherapy, and the person says your insurance is no longer valid. That was with a union, by the way, and that company was using that to attack that union. Right now, they're in union negotiations. If Medicare for All was in play, what would happen? The whole 15% issue that they're having, where the company wants the employees to pay 15% of the healthcare, goes away. Healthcare is no longer on the table. That money can go into wages, and those employees can, or those unions can fight for higher wages because they don't have to pay for their healthcare. If you're asking me, does Medicare for All hurt unions? Not in the least. Does it help everybody else in the country? Yes. And when the union contract is up for negotiation, healthcare would no longer be one of the items that they are fighting and negotiating for. Medicare for All does not hurt unions. It doesn't. All right. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys in a few.